Rule number 1 of X-Wing miniatures, always stay on target. And in this vlog, I want to build some tactica. I want to build that checklist of fundamental X-Wing miniatures tactics, independent of the faction, independent of the mission, independent of the list that you are playing, this DNA, this mechanics of the game that is going on. Now, certainly what you plan to play, the ships and how you plan to execute, that's important. That's going to deliver victory. But there is a whole underpinning of mechanics that can juice your list and make it better and make things easier. And also, ideally, turn by turn, to give yourself a little bit of a cushion, to give yourself some maneuverability, so if you make a mistake, you can recover. Or more importantly, when your opponent makes a mistake, you are in a position to capitalize. So let's look at these fundamentals and let's push out a few ideas, and then, of course, switch it over into the comments for my fellow pilots. So the first thing, always stay on target. Always stick together. Depending on your list, you're going to have a number of ships. They want to fly in formation. They literally want to be able to fly in formation. The firing arcs that they have, primary, secondary, whatever those arcs are, to be able to think of that as a radius that pushes out, that are always on target together. The idea is the multiple ships are linked together so that anything that flies within that targeting arc, that firing arc, can be hit by multiple ships. The moment that you break off, the moment that you send a ship somewhere else, you are removing that fire arc, you are decreasing your volume of dice. And volume of dice is very, very important, but we want to explore this ability to maneuver. Now, easier said than done, because your opponent is going to have various ships moving against you. Depending on the mission and the rules, there's going to be various obstacles. Part of the practice is just being able to randomly fly as a block of ships. And this block of ships becomes a little bit easier if you have bigger ships or smaller in your list, or if you're pumping out a lot of ships to pump out volume of dice, it becomes much, much harder to fly. Part of the practice in this is literally just setting up a table and trying to fly around objects, trying to fly around random other ships. Put your squadron up, put out some objects, put out some asteroids, put down a couple of other ships, and literally just twist the dial around and watch them go in odd and crazy directions, and try to fly as a block and try to be able to shoot as a block. We never want to engage one-on-one. Never one-on-one. We want 2, 3, 4, 5 multiples on one. If you are in range and if you are in my firing arc, then I am going to be hitting you with multiple ships. If you can do that with X-Wing miniatures, that is rule number 1. That is going to position you to just absolutely punish and tear up anything that comes into that firing arc. So when your opponent makes a mistake, makes a miscalculation, they think they're just out of that arc, or they're trying to maneuver or do something, and you catch them, you're going to be able to capitalize. Now, second, building on this, volume of dice is vital. This is a dice-based game, and the number of dice that you are able to roll depends on numerous factors, range, weapon system, abilities. But if we look, each ship to the target is going to be able to generate dice. You roll the dice, probability. Some are going to hit, some are going to miss. It depends on what's needed. You might roll a little bit higher, you might roll a little bit lower. But blowing up ships, destroying targets is based on volume of dice. Generally speaking, the more dice you roll, the greater the chance that, and yes, there's many layers that it has to go through, the greater the chance you are going to be able to damage a ship and destroy a ship. So we see how this pipes back to the fact that if you have multiple firing arcs overlapping, the dice that you can generate based on your list, you're going to be able to mobilize. A great exercise is to lay out your list, put out your ships, and just put the dice, if you have enough, next to each ship that they can fire, primary arc, that they can fire every single turn. That is your maximum volume of dice for the list. The ways that volume decreases is either as you take losses and are destroyed, take a ship off the list, take those dice off the list. They're out of the game. Or by firing arcs. Not being in that firing arc, take that dice out. So whatever volume of dice that you have, every single turn we want to be able to leverage. You want to be able to put down the greatest volume of dice. Now, the other tactica that layers over this is being able to manipulate the dice, being able to change the dice, being able to leverage the dice based on your faction, based on the ships, based on certain combos. How can you get more hits? How can you manipulate misses to hits? How can you manipulate crits, regular hits to crits? How can you bypass certain defenses? How can you work within those parameters to not just roll the dice, but being able to manipulate the results within the rules using ships and combos and factions, using the list and pushing that forward? That is a very, very important layer. And this is not a criticism. Many players tend to focus on the list in a very abstract way. So and that's important, right? The list looks and says, hey, here's everything that I can shoot. Here's my dice output. Here's my dice manipulation. Here's based on abilities where I'm going to try and shut down your ability to manipulate dice. And that's all important. But it filters back to that number one rule: always stay on target. If you can't fly as a block, if you can't fly together and stay together, then you're not getting the maximum result of all those dice every single turn.